She called the cops on my sick daughter, not knowing I was one of them. It started with the kind of scream you don't forget, the kind that stops your heart before your mind catches up. I was in the kitchen, pouring applesauce into a bowl, when I heard it. My daughter, Lily, had gone outside to get the mail. She was barefoot, wearing pajama pants and her favorite oversized hoodie. Her shaved head, a badge of her fight against leukemia, gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Then came the shrill voice. "Excuse me. You can't be here. Where are your parents?" I rushed out, badge still clipped to my belt from a morning shift. Across the lawn stood Karen. Not her real name, of course, but every neighborhood has one. She had a cell phone in one hand and outrage in the other. "I'm calling the police," she barked. "You already did," I said. Karen's face twisted, first in confusion, then in something closer to horror, because the person she had just called the cops on, the little girl with the shaved head, was my daughter, and the cop she thought would take care of this suspicious vagrant was already here, looking right at her. Our neighborhood was the kind that looked like a real estate brochure come to life. Manicured lawns, neat rows of identical mailboxes, and houses painted in regulation-approved shades of beige and blue. The homeowners association made sure everything stayed in line, from the color of your shutters to the length of your grass. On paper, it was peaceful, orderly, safe. But underneath, there was a constant tension humming going built on control, surveillance, and a quiet sort of judgment. I had moved here 3 years ago after transferring to the local precinct. Being a single father, I wanted a place where my daughter, Lily, could grow up with a sense of stability. At the time, she was a carefree 9-year-old who loved baking cookies and pretending to be a marine biologist. Back then, the idea of cancer was as distant as the moon. Everything changed in a single phone call. Lily's diagnosis shattered our world, pulling the ground out from under our feet. Chemotherapy became our new normal. Hospital stays replaced weekend outings. Her laughter, once constant, became something I held my breath to hear. When her hair began to fall out in clumps, she looked up at me one night and said, "Let's just get rid of it. It's not who I am anyway." I shaved her head myself in the kitchen under the soft hum of the fridge. She didn't cry. I almost did. The neighborhood changed after that. Or maybe I just started to see it differently. Some people offered kind smiles or casseroles. Others looked away. Then there was Karen. She didn't hide her disapproval. She never said anything directly, but she watched Lily like she was something broken, something out of place. Like having a shaved head in a neighborhood like ours meant she didn't belong. The first round of chemo hit Lily harder than the doctors expected. Her energy vanished almost overnight, replaced by a kind of quiet endurance that no child should ever have to master. She stopped eating the foods she used to love. Her favorite mac and cheese sat cold on her plate. The color drained from her face, and her once bright eyes dimmed with a heaviness I didn't know how to fight. I tried to stay strong for her. I told her jokes during infusions and brought sketchbooks to the hospital when she was too tired to walk. I found myself memorizing the sound of her breath as she slept, terrified of silence. On the rare good days, we'd sit in the backyard and count birds in the oak tree. I held on to those moments like lifelines. The hair loss started about 2 weeks in. At first it was just strands on her pillow, a few extra clumps in the shower drain. Then one morning she looked up from her cereal and ran her hand through her hair. A full lock came out in her palm. She stared at it, not crying, just quiet. That afternoon she told me she wanted it gone. Not little by little, all of it. We waited until after dinner. I pulled out my electric razor and sat her in a chair near the window. The sun had just dipped below the fence line, casting soft orange light across the floor. Lily closed her eyes and tilted her head forward. The buzz of the razor was louder than I expected. As her hair fell away, I watched a part of her childhood fall with it. She didn't flinch, didn't shed a tear. When we were done, she looked up at me and smiled. "Feels lighter," she said. That night I posted a photo of us on social media. Her eyes were tired, but she was smiling, wearing one of my old baseball caps. The comments were mostly kind. But the next day, when she stepped outside without the hat, everything shifted. Some of the neighbors looked at her differently, not with pity exactly, but discomfort. A few offered sympathetic nods. Others glanced away as if her bald head made them feel something they didn't want to admit. A child riding his scooter slowed down and stared until his mother pulled him along. Karen was the only one who didn't bother hiding her reaction. She watched from her porch, arms crossed, her gaze sharp and invasive. She whispered something to another neighbor who didn't respond. I felt it in my gut, that slow, sinking feeling that no matter how much strength Lily showed, there would be people who saw her as something other. But Lily never asked to cover up. She never wore the hat again. She walked with her head high, even when she looked pale and thin. She knew who she was, and that knowledge became her armor. I only wished the world would be kind enough to honor it. Karen lived 2 houses down in a pristine, 2-story colonial, with trimmed hedges shaped like little pyramids. Her porch had seasonal wreaths that rotated like clockwork, and a live, laugh, love sign that had faded under the sun. She was the kind of neighbor who handed out flyers for the HOA newsletter and reminded you if your recycling bin was too far from the curb. On the surface, she smiled like everyone else. But there was always something tight in her expression, something calculating behind her eyes. She watched people the way some folks watch traffic, waiting for someone to slip up. From the beginning, Karen made it clear that she expected the neighborhood to run by her unspoken rules. It started with small things. One time, she left a note on my door, saying the grass on the side of my house was creeping toward unacceptable length. Another time, she asked if I could move my patrol car from the street into the driveway, because it made the neighborhood look tense. I shrugged it off, even laughed about it to a coworker at the station. But the tone behind those requests never changed. It wasn't about order, it was about control. She treated HOA meetings like courtroom proceedings. During one, she argued against someone painting their shutters red, citing neighborhood integrity. At another, she questioned whether the Andersons' trampoline was visible from the road, calling it a visual disruption. She wasn't just strict, she was obsessive. And she seemed to especially enjoy confronting people who didn't push back. When Lily got sick, Karen didn't offer condolences. She didn't ask if we needed anything or drop off food like a few of the other neighbors did. What she did instead was watch. She lingered on her porch whenever Lily walked past. Once, she stopped me on the sidewalk and asked if I thought it was appropriate for Lily to be outside looking the way she does. Her voice stayed calm, but every word carried judgment. "I just think it might be upsetting for the other children," she said. Like Lily's presence was a disruption to the suburban illusion she worked so hard to maintain. I didn't respond to her that time. I couldn't trust myself to say anything without regretting it. After that, Karen started walking her dog a little more often, always around the time Lily went to check the mail or water the plants. She stared longer than she should. She never waved. I told myself not to escalate things. Lily had enough to deal with. But beneath it all, I knew Karen wasn't just uncomfortable with illness. She was uncomfortable with anything she couldn't categorize or control. To her, Lily's shaved head was a threat to the picture-perfect order she wanted our neighborhood to reflect. And like everything she didn't understand, she labeled it a problem. One that she believed needed to be fixed, or removed. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of warm, lazy day that begged for stillness. Lily had just finished a short walk around the backyard and was feeling strong enough to get the mail on her own. I watched her from the window, heart lifting at the small independence she was reclaiming. She was barefoot, her pajama pants dragging a little at the hems, and she wore her favorite oversized hoodie with a faded cartoon octopus on the back. Her head, now completely bald, shimmered under the sun like polished stone. She stepped out onto the front path with her usual quiet determination, walking slowly but steady toward the mailbox. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug when I heard the voice. Hey, you, what are you doing here?" The tone was sharp, not curious but accusatory. I froze, then moved quickly to the front window. Karen was striding across her perfectly edged lawn, phone already in her hand, lips curled like she'd just caught someone sneaking across her flower bed. Lily turned to face her, startled. I saw her mouth move, probably saying she lived here, but Karen didn't stop. She was gesturing with one hand, the other holding her phone tightly like a badge. "You can't just walk around like this," she snapped. "Where are your parents? You need to leave right now." Lily stepped back, confused. She looked toward our house, eyes wide, unsure if she was in trouble or just caught in something she didn't understand. That look cut through me like a blade. I was already on my way out the door. As I reached the porch, Karen turned to glance at me, and then back at Lily. Her voice rose, louder and tighter. "This is private property. You're trespassing. I'm calling the police." "She lives here," I said, stepping out onto the walkway. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped her in her tracks. Karen turned, squinting as if she hadn't quite registered who I was. Then her expression twisted. "You know this girl?" she asked, almost incredulous. "She's my daughter," I said, "and you're harassing her." For a moment, the air went dead quiet. Lily looked back and forth between us, clutching the stack of mail she had managed to pull from the box. Karen lowered her phone a fraction but didn't put it away. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," she said, voice quieter now but no less certain. "You can't just let people—" "She's recovering from cancer," I cut in. "That shaved head? That's not a disguise. That's survival." Karen opened her mouth to respond, then paused. Her eyes flicked down to my waist, where my badge still clipped to my belt from my earlier shift. It glinted slightly in the sunlight, clear and unmistakable. Her lips parted, then closed again. The certainty in her stance began to falter. For once, she didn't seem to know what to say. "You already called the cops?" I asked. "Good. Let's have them come." She hesitated, and for a second I saw something flicker in her face. It wasn't regret, it was calculation. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back toward her house. She didn't look at Lily again. I walked to my daughter and crouched beside her. Her hands were trembling, and the mail had fallen slightly from her grip. "You didn't do anything wrong," I said, brushing her hand gently. "She's just scared of what she doesn't understand." Lily nodded, eyes still wide, and let me take her hand as we walked back toward the house. Behind us, the silence of the neighborhood settled again, but something had changed. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I guided Lily up the steps and into the house, but I didn't close the door behind us. My hands were steady, but my chest felt like it was holding back a tide. I sat Lily on the couch and told her to stay put while I got her some water. She didn't say anything. Her face was blank, but I could see the confusion behind her eyes. She wasn't sure what had just happened or why she had become a problem for simply walking to the mailbox. I stepped back outside. Karen was still in her yard, pacing with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low but tense. She was clearly still on the line with dispatch. I walked calmly across the grass, not trying to hide the badge at my waist or the purpose in my stride. She saw me coming and ended the call, slipping the phone into her pocket like it hadn't just been the spark for everything. "She doesn't look like she belongs here," she said again, softer now but still clinging to the same logic. I didn't recognize her. "You've seen her dozens of times," I said. "She's my daughter, and she's lived here as long as we have." Karen glanced toward my porch, as if seeing it for the first time. Her posture shifted slightly, like she was preparing an excuse or softening a blow before it landed. "You know how it is," she said. "We've had incidents in other neighborhoods. You can't be too careful." She looked out of place, and the way she was dressed. I thought maybe— "You thought a bald child in a hoodie was dangerous?" I interrupted, keeping my tone level. "You thought she was a threat to this neighborhood?" "I thought she needed help," Karen said. She looked lost. "No, you thought she didn't belong, and you made that decision based on nothing but your discomfort. You didn't ask if she was okay. You didn't knock on my door. You went straight to your phone." Karen crossed her arms, the defensive stance of someone who was used to being right. "This isn't about her being sick." "You're right," I said. "It's about you seeing something unfamiliar and deciding it was a problem." She shifted again, eyes flicking down to the badge. "So what now? You're going to report me?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at her house, at the flag flapping gently above her porch, at the perfectly aligned chairs and potted plants. A curated life, every inch under control. "No," I said. "I'm going to do what you should have done. I'm going to take care of my daughter." With that, I turned and walked back home. I didn't slam the door, but I didn't close it gently either. Lily was still on the couch, clutching the cup of water I'd left for her. I sat beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. She leaned into me just slightly, enough to tell me she felt safe again. That would be the last time anyone made her feel less than whole in her own neighborhood. We had just settled back into the living room when I heard the low crunch of tires over gravel. I stood and looked through the window. A patrol car was pulling up to the curb. Another followed close behind, lights off but moving with purpose. I sighed and rubbed my forehead. Karen must have made the call before I even got outside. Once it hits dispatch, they don't cancel unless someone confirms it was a false alarm. Lily saw the squad cars and looked at me, her eyes wide. I could see the question forming on her face, whether this was about her, whether she had done something wrong. I gave her a soft nod and motioned for her to stay put. Then I stepped outside. 2 officers climbed out of the first vehicle. One of them, Carter, recognized me immediately and lifted a hand. "Hey, Maddox," he said. "We got a call about a suspicious person near your address. Some kind of disturbance involving a minor." I gave a tired smile and motioned toward the house. "That minor is my daughter. The person who called was my neighbor. She saw a sick kid getting the mail and assumed something criminal was happening." Carter raised his eyebrows. His partner looked toward Karen's house, where she stood just inside her yard, arms crossed, watching like she expected a scene to unfold in her favor. "Mind if we talk to her?" Carter asked. "Be my guest," I said, folding my arms. The 2 officers made their way over, and I stayed by the porch. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of an audience. I could hear fragments of the conversation float over. Karen was speaking quickly, her voice pitched just high enough to sound falsely concerned. She looked confused. She wasn't wearing shoes. "I thought maybe she wandered away from somewhere," she said. "It's not about the way she looks. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood." Carter asked a few questions, nodding slowly. The other officer, Reyes, didn't say much. After a few minutes, they both turned back toward me. Karen's expression had soured, lips pressed tightly together as if holding back something sharper. Carter stopped at the base of my steps. "All good here," he said. "We'll file it as a non-incident. Just another case of an overzealous, watchful eye." "Appreciate it," I said. "Sorry you had to come out for nothing." He shook his head. "Not your fault." The cars pulled away, quiet as they had arrived. I went back inside and sat beside Lily again. She had been listening through the screen door, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Did she get in trouble?" she asked. "Not really," I said. "But now she knows what it feels like to be the one under someone else's eyes." Lily nodded, her gaze fixed on a spot on the floor. She thought I was dangerous. "No," I said. "She thought you were different, and sometimes people are scared of different, but that doesn't mean they're right." She leaned against me, her head resting just beneath my shoulder. For the first time in days, I felt her breathing slow into something calm. Karen may have called the police hoping for something dramatic, but what she got was the truth. Standing quietly on a porch with a cup of water in her hand and not an ounce of shame in her bones. By Monday morning, word had spread. Not because I told anyone, but because things like this have a way of traveling fast in neighborhoods built on routine and image. People talk over fences, at the dog park, in the line at the community coffee cart. They lower their voices, glance over their shoulders, and share the newest version of events like passing a secret. It started with Carter's visit to the HOA office. He hadn't filed a formal complaint, but he'd made a casual comment to the board president that he hoped neighbors would think twice before calling emergency services over a child walking to the mailbox. That was enough. The board called an emergency meeting, quiet but pointed, and Karen's name came up more than once. Neighbors began to re-evaluate their own experiences. One woman remembered Karen confronting her teenage son for playing music in his car, even though his windows were up. Another recalled her obsessing over someone's garden gnome, calling it non-compliant decor. Someone else had saved a screenshot of a message Karen posted on the HOA message board about individuals walking through the neighborhood who do not meet the expected appearance of residents. At first, Karen tried to push back. She posted a long message to the neighborhood Facebook group, claiming she had acted out of concern, that she thought Lily might be a runaway or in distress. She never mentioned the shaved head or the fact that Lily lived just a few houses away. Her words rang hollow. The comments under her post told the real story. People asked why she hadn't just knocked on our door, why she assumed danger instead of care. A few thanked me directly for staying calm and professional, though I hadn't written a single word myself. Karen stopped attending HOA meetings for a while. Her porch, once busy with seasonal decorations and garden flags, sat bare. No wreath for spring, no welcome mat. She began walking her dog later at night, when fewer people were out. I never saw her looking toward our house again. Some neighbors, people I barely knew before, started checking in on Lily more often. One brought over a tray of brownies. Another invited her to help plant wildflowers in their front yard. It wasn't grand or sweeping, but it was real. Lily didn't smile much at first, but I could see her starting to believe that the world outside our home might be safe again. Karen wasn't exiled, but she had been exposed. The quiet authority she used to hold, the way her words could sway the board or shape a complaint, was gone. No one said it out loud, but the silence that followed her now spoke volumes. What she didn't just change how people saw her, it changed how they saw Lily. Not as someone to pity or avoid, but as someone who stood in the sun, unashamed, even when others flinched away. Spring moved in slowly, with soft breezes and the smell of wet earth rising after every rain. Lily started spending more time outside again. She liked to sit on the front steps with her sketch pad, drawing the trees or the occasional bird that landed nearby. Her energy was still touch and go, but her spirit was steadier than I'd seen in months. There was a quiet boldness in her, like she had taken all the fear and uncertainty and folded it into something stronger. I noticed the way neighbors looked at her now. It wasn't pity anymore. It was recognition. They waved, said hello, asked about her drawings. Some stopped to chat, even if only for a minute. One little girl from the next street over brought Lily a bracelet she had made, bright with beads and strung too tightly. Lily wore it anyway. That small circle of color on her wrist meant something more than kindness. It meant inclusion. Karen kept her distance. We passed each other a few times, usually in silence. She didn't speak to Lily again. I didn't expect her to. Maybe one day she would understand what she had done. Or maybe she wouldn't. Either way, we had stopped living in the shadow of her judgment. That was enough for me. The HOA board quietly issued new guidance about emergency calls and neighborhood conduct. They encouraged talking to your neighbors before jumping to conclusions. It was their way of making sure what happened didn't happen again, even if no one named it outright. I could live with that. Change didn't always have to come with fanfare. Sometimes it came through silence, through eyes that looked a little longer and saw more clearly than before. Lily asked me one evening if she could volunteer at the local animal shelter when she felt better. She wanted to help walk the dogs, especially the shy ones that didn't get picked often. I told her I thought that was perfect. She smiled, tucked her sketchpad under her arm, and went back to drawing the old oak tree at the end of our street. Its branches were just starting to bloom. I watched her from the doorway, feeling something settle inside me that had been restless for a long time. She wasn't just healing physically, she was growing into herself piece by piece, no longer shrinking under the weight of stares or assumptions, but rising above them. Some people never admit when they're wrong. They hide behind rules and reputations, hoping the world forgets. But others remember, others learn. That's how neighborhoods change. Not through speeches or punishment, but through small acts of understanding that build into something lasting. Lily didn't need anyone's approval. She never did. But seeing the world make space for her again, on her terms, was something I'll never stop being grateful for. It reminded me that the strongest kind of protection doesn't always come from a badge. Sometimes it comes from standing still and letting people see who you really are. That night, as I tucked Lily into bed, she lay still for a long time, staring at the ceiling with her hands folded across her stomach. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. I sat beside her, waiting, knowing something was on her mind. "Dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did I scare her? Is that why she called the police?" I looked at her face, pale in the low light, her eyes searching mine, not for facts but for comfort. I reached out and brushed a hand over her smooth head. "No, sweetheart," I said. "You didn't scare her. You just reminded her of something she didn't understand. And instead of being kind, she let her fear do the talking." She nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. After a pause, she added, "I don't want people to be scared of me." "They're not," I said. "People who matter won't be. And the ones who are, well, maybe they're just scared of what they haven't had the strength to face themselves." Lily turned to me then and gave the smallest smile. "You're still going to let me shave my head even after I get better, right?" I laughed, surprised by the question. "If that's what you want. But I think your hair might come back with a mind of its own." She reached for my hand and held it tight. I sat there with her a while longer, watching her breathe, watching peace return to her face. It struck me then how much courage it took just to be herself. Not in spite of what she had gone through, but because of it. Some people called the police that day, but the truth was, the bravest person in this neighborhood had never needed protection at all.